Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's the second Tuesday, and that means it's time for the next event in the Sustainability Expert Series. I'm Janet Greco. I'm from Broadcast Projects, and today I'm greeting you from the East Coast of the USA, where last week, thanks to the climate crisis, we choked on the air and had apocalyptic skies. So that's been interesting, and some food for thought also from this side of the Atlantic. This event series hopefully will give you some food for thoughts as well on what each of us can do personally and professionally in order to do our part to save the planet. Today's session is going to be on open source and sustainability, and we have some really great speakers, and I'm going to let Ben explain about that. But first of all, I just want to thank you for making the time to be here. If you're new here, I just want to tell a little bit about the event format. We will have 2 hours today. And the first hour is a sort of standard webinar format where Ben will be moderating with our guests and having a nice conversation. And then in the second hour, you'll have your chance to join in an interactive session where you could just join the conversation. Just a few points of housekeeping before I turn it over to Ben. That is I would, just strongly recommend that you turn your mic off in the second hour if you're not speaking. And Ben and our other moderators will do their best to make sure that we answer all of your questions and keep the conversation going. Second thing is just to point out that journalists may be present. So in that second hour, if you're speaking, be aware of that. And we do ask the journalists as well not to quote anybody without asking permission. There are some community guidelines linked in the event description below. And with that, I wish you a great conversation today. And now over to Ben.
Thank you very much, Janet. So this event was a long time coming. We've been planning and talking about it for a long time. The idea is, we are in the media industry and talking about sustainability. A lot of the technology that we run uses software as its basis. And so we're going to focus on the link between how we build software and sustainability. And those of us like myself who've been involved with green movements of various kinds for a long time, one of the things we've realized over the decades is that you can't solve environmental issues on their own. You have to solve them in a holistic way. So when we talk about ESG, the E is for environment. Of course, we have to fix things, but the S is for social. And if we don't find how people work with the solutions we have, the solutions won't work. And in that sense, we're going to talk first with Romain about the open source community and that approach. And Romain has structured his discussion into 4 different parts. And we'll see about, the economics of open source systems. We'll see about, how sharing can be a way of doing things more efficiently and spending less energy on things. Why sometimes sharing isn't the solution for everything. And we'll see about the evolution of software efficiency and how that relates to open source. And that's where we'll bring Simon in. Simon, who will present himself in a few moments, and he will be talking from a GreenWeb perspective, and will actually dive into software code itself, so that when a piece of code is executed to do something for us, if that piece of code uses 10 instructions inside the central processing unit or 1,000 instructions to do the same job, obviously that's going to have a different impact, especially if that is run on millions upon millions of devices. So that'll be in the second part of this discussion. But I'm going to start first, as I said, with Romain. So before we dive into the conversation, Romain, if you'd like to just take the mic and start by introducing yourself and your company.
Sure. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Janet, for having me along with Simon. So I'm Romain Bouqueau. I'm a developer. I'm an open source contributor on the GPAC Open Source project. So we're in the multimedia field, and more specifically, we do some packaging. It's a project that's been 20 years old, and we have all kinds of customers. And we recently announced that we were doing the packaging of Netflix. So that's a quite popular software. And we came into some of the things that we are going to talk about today. And yeah, as you told, there are 4 different themes that I'd like to talk about, and I think the first one is maybe to have a look at the history, the evolution of efficiency in software, because I think that's one of the angles where there are opportunities to improve a lot. A long time ago, at the beginning of computer engineering, we were really limited by performances, and so we were trying to do more with less because we had no computing power, we had no networking, we were limited by the memory. So the cost, our ability to produce was actually quite limited. And I think it's important for me as an open source software because that, one of the bases of these communities, the video hacking communities, the video encoding communities, we were always limited by our hardware. And then at some point in time, I think hardware became a commodity. They were the personal computers, the PCs. Everybody had a computer and then a laptop with a tremendous amount of computing power. And we went into an era of abundance where you could do it. It was, things were not driven by, limitations on performances, on everything was, typically possible in what you needed to do, but we were driven by conveniency. And that's where we started to consider that, we wanted more functionality and not necessarily, pushing the performances or optimizing. I think a good example of that is the use of web browsers or virtualizations where we add layers, these layers of indirections that just makes us so less efficient, but that makes things so easy. But when you consider the open source software in the multimedia field that were written 20 years ago, they were written mostly in low-level languages, mostly C, C++, assembly, whereas newer soft is written in Java or in JavaScript. So we're going to talk about this. I think I remember discussions we had with Simon also of the way you can actually build software that is more efficient. But it's a question of compromises. I don't know, Simon, if you want to interact now on this or if you want to have your part later.
Yeah, actually, I think I'm gonna talk to that about that later because we will talk about eco-conception. So everything about sobriety and the way we can do it.
Okay. The other idea also that's really important for me is that there is a lot of redundancy in the efforts that we are doing. So in terms of computing, but also in terms of human efforts, we could do less by sharing more. So open source is in the middle of this. So that's for software, of course, and but I think because I come from the open source software community, but I would also come, if I think of Simon, of sharing sustainable ideas and finding sustainable solutions and sharing them so that we can apply the best recipes.
But then, so Romain, would it be true to say that a huge proportion of the functionality delivered by any project is relatively generic, and the specifics why we're going to get together and do a new piece of software, the original stuff we're going to do is going to concern, and that's what I'm interested to find out, what percentage, maybe like 5% of the code base. So if I have 1 million lines of code, is it going to be ever more than a few small percentages that are going to be about what I'm actually trying to do with this new project? And you have to bring all this old stuff, huge amounts of other stuff that's already been done 10 times in other projects because you need that, but it's nothing new about it. Is that the right kind of metric? Are we talking about 5%, would you say, more or less?
Yeah, I think it's more. Maybe it's a bit difficult to summarize in a number, but we're building in software that is increasingly complex. It's more and more complex over time. And that's one of the reasons also why there are all these level of indirections that makes us inefficient. You could build something that is complex because, the complexity is needed, and be efficient with that. But the way we build software is limited by our own intelligence. So artificial intelligence is maybe out of scope for today, but at some point we will need to be smarter than what we have. Because to do this, we divide and conquer. We just divide really big problems into, smaller problems. And that's where open source is really powerful. We're building the foundations, the infrastructure that are the basic bricks to build things that are even more complex. So that for me, the open source just extends from the the bottom of the pyramid. And for me, there's been a lot of change over the last 10 years in open source. A lot of people are considering using an open source kernel, an open source web browser. I think open source is something that is really wide open. A couple of days back, I saw this interview of Mark Zuckerberg saying that with the artificial intelligence, open source would be a basis for everybody. If you want to do something that is reviewed by a lot of people, open, with contributing a lot of ideas and avoiding the duplication that would make it so inefficient, then open source is one of the way. So what I'm trying to say is that we can do less by sharing more, because the best we can do when talking about sustainability is to produce less. But open source, on the other hand, yes, please.
This is something I have an issue with. In the media space, we talk about it in production versus consumption. So when people say, I've done this amazing thing, I've reduced the digital footprint of this piece of production. And I said, well, just a minute, we have to see what's the context. Because if you're producing a stream that's going to be watched by 2 people, then the amount of energy you use to consume, that's really important. If you're creating a stream that's going to be viewed by 10 million people, honestly, whether you use a few extra kilowatts or a few grams of CO2 more here or there, isn't that significant if you're thinking of you're creating a service for 10 million people. So the same goes here. If you're saying we're reducing the effort of the software development, is that something that's really significant and worth our effort to reduce? I mean, I don't know. I'm sort of thinking out loud here, but how many million software developers are there on the planet? Do we want to? Is it a problem that's tangible in terms of CO2 footprint?
Yeah. So the first thing is, in terms of computer engineering, there is a talent shortage. And I think the talent shortage will be mitigated by some technological solutions like no code or GitHub Copilot, so AI assisted coding. But in the end, what you need is what makes the difference with humans is that we are able to reason in a deterministic way and build things not in a probabilistic way, but really understanding the stuff and building, the foundations, as I said. And the number of people being able to do this is rather limited. So if you're looking for someone that understands the system end to end, there are not so many people. And being able to program on the top of it and execute, there are not so many people. So, and in my opinion, it's not a problem that is only on the end device or on the distribution. As you said, there is a balance. Depending on your use case, you need to do different choices. I don't need to have the best compression if my content is going to be distributed only to 2 people. So that's the example of, I don't know, Instagram. People, they capture the movie for, themselves to a small community. Is it necessary to send it to a server, to transcode it, and to push it on distributed servers where, no cache is actually needed? I have an anecdote on this. When we made the press release about Netflix, so Netflix needed a lot of optimizations, of course. But at the same time, Instagram announced that they were using our packager Transmux, so a really lightweight operation to send what was on the phone directly to the other viewers without going through, the servers and the usual distribution. And it just, I don't remember the name, but they say it alleviated by 97% the cost of distribution for all this content that is actually not popular. So I think there are real gains on this. And my opinion, of course, is that there is a real problem with underused devices in general, because the difference in consumption between a device that is idle and a device that is actually used is not that big, but all the processing power is actually lost. And that's the same for the infrastructures, and probably something we're going to talk about later, because I know greening of streaming is actually active on this kind of measurements.
Okay, well, I've kind of sidetracked you from your 4-pointed agenda with my questions.
No problem.
Should we get back to the economic side of open source systems?
Yeah, sure. So first, probably saying that open source is not a panacea. You cannot solve, every of the problems with open source. To be short, there are things that require some capital. And in open source, you have a lot of goodwill, you have a lot of passion, but actually, if it requires capital, then you need the big companies to, actually be here. I'm sorry, I take this example. That's not intentional, but for what's happening in artificial intelligence, building what has been built wouldn't have been possible only with open source or public research. There were these big companies saying we can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to generate all the models and compute again and again. This is capital. And when it comes to the economics of open source, there is a lot of things that are actually complex. Because open source software, like any software, actually grows, and when you grow, you have a kind of debt. You need to pay to sustain what you're doing and to keep paying for being innovative and competitive. You need competition anyway.
Could you explain that a bit?
Competition.
Could you explain what you just said? You need to pay to stay competitive. I didn't quite follow what that means.
Yeah, right. That's because in open source software, so at the beginning, you're really efficient for several reasons. So in the case of multimedia open source software, a lot of the software that we are using today, were started 20 years ago, at the moment where efficiency was important. So GPAC, GPAC, media info, that's all written in C with a lot of assembly underneath. That's really close to the trying to get the the best possible performance on top of it. But then there is a problem, like the project grows, and then all people, they are doing it at night.
Oh, we've lost our speaker, so we will jump back into that discussion about all aspects of open source in just a few moments. But let's fill the gap, Simon, with what we were going to talk about in 10 minutes, but we can change things around, which is efficiency. And I gather from what Romain said that, back in the olden days, 40 years ago, whenever it was, the expensive resource was computing time. But over the last couple of decades, probably 3 decades, the expensive resource has been developer time. And so nowadays you can grab a teeny little Post-it sized interface, drag a few things across, press save, and the thing generates 1 million lines of code in some app somewhere just to do some simple little task. Simon, could you take us through start by introducing yourself, because you didn't do that earlier on, but what this actually means in terms of efficiency for devices when they're running code, the fact that we are not optimizing the code, and what it would mean to optimize code. Over to you, Simon. Start with a quick intro.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Janet. So yeah, I will talk about that and how we can maybe optimize things. And I think we are a lot focusing on code, but when you are producing a project, it's just not about code, because we are also talking about UX, UI, etc. Maybe Romain is back.
Well, let's continue now. Let's wait for
no
his connection to stabilize.
Okay, so enjoy this moment to introduce myself. I'm Simon Cardon, CEO of GreenWeb. GreenWeb is an 8 years old project and 4 years old startup based in France and specialized in sustainable IT solutions. And globally, we help our clients to reduce their environmental footprint related to IT. And we developed 3 expertises. First one is consulting and impact analysis. So everything about measurement. We are currently conceiving a tool to analyze the environmental impact of digital in a dynamic way, so in real time, and through LCA, so life cycle analysis. The second part is web eco-conception. So we do custom eco-conceived website and mobile app. We will launch a tool to generate a simple eco-conceived website within 3 months. It's a bit like Wix, like you certainly know Wix, but we will try to reduce it by 5. And the last part is about hosting. So green hosting, we developed our hosting services based on refurbished electronic components with hydroelectric energy and natural cooling. So without any climatization, so cooled by the freshness of the groundwater. Do you want me to continue to
Yeah, sure.
let
Just
Romain
to
speak?
let people know, in preparing this meeting, I went to your website and I pushed my old website that hasn't been updated for 10 years for an analysis, and I scored 13 out of 100, 1-3. So I got red mark, really, really bad website that was designed like 12 years ago and hasn't been updated for many years. So huge amount of work for me there, thanks to you. But no, please go on, and you were going to tell us a bit more about the main environmental impact from digital, the way you see it from your company.
Yeah, definitely. So let's start from the beginning. So why do we need a sustainable approach in IT? Just because IT is the main pollution. So it's almost 4% of the greenhouse gas. In terms of pollution, if IT would be a country, it would be the third after USA and China. But the question is, where is that impact from? Where is the pollution from? So you have 3 parts. The first one is producing hardware. It's 70% of the global impact of IT. The second part is network and infrastructure. It's 15%. And the last one is the use, 15% as well. So it's daily use and data production. So this figure depends on the energy mix of your country. So you certainly know that, but it's around 40 grams of CO2 equivalent in France, and around 400 in USA, and around 700 in China. So
this is
consuming
grams per kilowatt hour, yeah?
Yeah, grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. Yeah, definitely. So consuming Amazon using 50% of coal energy is not the same as using green hosting, so that use only renewable energy. So it's important to, I think, understand that internet is using electricity, and the way we are producing this electricity depends on the energy mix. So the thing is, okay, we have 3 main sources of pollution, but all those parts are all linked. So if you have more users using an online service, you need to produce more bytes. It requires energy depending on the energy mix, and more capacity, and so more servers to use, which cause aging, and it implies energy consumption on end user's device, which means also accelerating device battery aging. So to sum up, when we talk about the environmental impact of digital, we actually need to get an holistic point of view. This is not just the data, it's all about what is needed to exploit, to produce, to use the data. It's an example with fake figures, but if an online services require per user 10 HEMO to run, 20 watts on a device per hour, plus 20 watts on server side. So for example, 0.2 CPU and 0.2 GEO RAM on server side, plus 20 watts on network equipment through Wi-Fi, 5G, box, etc. And so you will have to multiply it by all users. So all those elements need to be considered to calculate the environmental impact of the service. So as you understand, if you reduce those figures, just a few, even one, you can reduce your environmental footprint. So this is what we were talking about at the beginning. It just the way we are when we propose an online service, it's not just the bandwidth, it's not just a device on the side, not just a server on the side, it's all of that with the infrastructure and with everything. So the whole of view, it's really required if you really want to calculate, and I will explain then how we can calculate the global footprint of these services. Do you want me to focus a bit on video? Because at the beginning, I'm more like IT and web parts, not in video and media.
Yeah,
it's
most of our audience are in media. I'd like to try and jump into, Romain, we'll get back to open source in a sec, but I'd like to try and just comprehend the size of the problem or it's measurable. If we think about, look, let's take I'm thinking out loud, a case like a nice round number, 10 million, like that's about the number of subscribers Orange would have in France, for example. So you have 10 million devices that are operator controlled. So we have control over the software and what version's running. What would it mean in terms of impact if we were to have more efficient code versus inefficient code? Could we think of some example? As I said in my intro, if something uses 10 lines of code or 1,000 lines of code to perceive the same function, what is the actual measurable impact in terms of grams of CO2? How would we go about measuring that, Simon?
There are several things to say about that, because the first one is mainly when you are speaking about web, like for example, we are mainly using WordPress like CMS in the web industry. Like when you are executing code on WordPress, maybe 80% of the code is just useless. So the first thing, I think, to optimize code and to optimize the thing is just to make sure you only use the code you need. And it's maybe just a basis, but actually it's when you check, and when we check and we measure a lot of things, we just see that, okay, we have a service at the end for end user, and we are executing things which are not used by the end user. So firstly, we just need to cut this down.
But wouldn't that have a direct implication for the cost of the development project? Because my understanding, I used to be a software developer in my early career for about 10 years. So I have an old understanding of this. And my understanding is if you take a piece of code that you're going to reuse multiple times, you're going to save a lot of developer time. But the piece of code is going to be significantly bigger to cater for all the use cases. And that's about the same thing. So you're talking about, we're using a website with WordPress. It has all this code in it. And I only need this amount of code for my website. So let me just get rid of WordPress, roll my sleeves up and code some HTML or whatever I need to code. It will be really efficient, but whereas it would have taken me 10 minutes to update my website, now it's going to take me 2 hours or whatever the ratio might be.
Yes. Yeah, but the thing is, it's like when you are building a project now, you are using some elements from one is open source, the other one is from there, the other one is from there. And actually, at the final, you just need a few parts of all of them, but you are executing all those modules from everywhere. And
let's bring Romain in there. So Romain, in a real life project, maybe you could talk about the integration you did with Netflix or whatever. When you have, there must be cases where there's a chunk of open source software that has been tested and retested and is really the Bible. It's been there for 10 years in the making, and it's the fantastic piece of code you've always needed. And it's 1,000 lines long in this example. And you're about to integrate it for your new project. You only need 500 lines of it. Now, surely if every time you come across that thing, you remove 500 lines and make a new version and branch and fork, GitHub would become a complete mess. So sometimes you're going to make the decision as the owner of this project, I'm going to keep the 1,000 lines in there just because it's going to make everybody's life so much easier.
Yes, absolutely. You need to make compromises, but if you know that you're going to deploy to 10 million or 1 billion devices, you're going to make this optimization, either manually or by writing some code that just gets rid of what is unused. So you'll make typically in GPAC a contribution that, you know, allows you to build GPAC without some of the features. That's modular. And when coming back to what you said, you gave a really interesting examples of all these devices deployed by typically telcos, the set-top boxes, or the routers that are deployed. For me, there is, so as I said, first, they should run 100% all the time. If you don't do that, you're not really efficient. Second, I think Simon told us 70% of the equivalent CO2 creation comes from the device itself. So the lifetime should be extended as much as possible. And one of the reasons why we update on this, at least in the video field, is that at some point they are not compatible anymore with where we are deploying. But do we really need to change all the box just because we have a new codec? Isn't it possible to have something that is programmable, like a FPGA, inside the device? Or can't we just, plug the decoder inside the box, and when you need to change it, you just unplug the old, decoder and just plug another decoder into it, instead of changing all the devices, in all homes? I'm pretty sure there are things that we can actually do. And this idea doesn't come to me. There is a laptop manufacturer, so now they are doing also, servers that call Frameworks. That's a US-based startup, and that's what they propose. They guarantee that all the pieces will be available for, some long time, and it's modular. Like, you can plug the parts that you need. You need more USB ports. You take the USB ports. You need a network adapter. You take a network adapter. You need a better display. You take a better display. And okay, it's a bigger laptop. It's not as small as, the latest one that you would like to buy, but at least, it's going to last over time. That's more sustainable.
Yeah, the issue about, just to give a counter argument there with the sustainability and long life of things, it depends on what Simon was saying before, the energy mix. And in the white paper that was published yesterday, which I talked about last month, about Wi-Fi, we calculated that for a 40% more efficient device, a new generation of device comes, it's 40% more energy efficient. If you are a Polish operator, you should put that new device in. It's good for the planet as long as it has at least over 3 years of shelf life. If it has over 3 years, it's paid for itself. In France, because the energy mix is much better in terms of carbon, you need that same device has to have a shelf life of at least 30 years, 10 times longer, to make sense. So we can't have a generic rule that always keep all devices as long as possible. I think it depends on energy mix. But back to this this core subject of yeah.
I disagree. That's just because you're trying to summarize this in terms of CO2. But you're taking resources from the planet that are not unlimited and that is not CO2 to build this. We should make them last as long as possible. Cars should last as long as possible. In all cases, whatever the price, it should last forever. I don't know if you remember, I think that some people may be old enough. When you bought electronics 30 years ago, you had the schematics. You could repair it yourself. That's just because we had all this convenience and whatever that people decided that you need to go to the repair shops, and there are no repair shops anymore. And so you just throw it away and you buy another one. That's just because we're too rich and we're considering that this is, unlimited resources. This is not unlimited.
This is an interesting debate. Maybe let's stay with it for a minute, but I don't want to spend a large part of today's webinar on it because it could take an hour. The idea that you might need to change the generation of devices because your device is, say, with automobiles, at one point, the regulator says these cars over a certain level of pollution, they are forbidden. They have to be dismantled, and we'll try and get the materials back. But that's what's best for the planet. At one point, with a very, very old car that uses 10 times more petrol than a modern car and leaks oil, and you don't believe that there comes a point, even with electronic devices, where what's in the best interest of the planet is to retire that device. There's never such a case for you, Romain.
For me, yeah, I think we could update them. We should make sure that we can update them. There is a car, it's running, maybe we need to change the engine, but you don't need to put the whole car in the garbage.
Okay.
That's a lot of resources. I don't like to put things in the garbage. If you can give it a second life, just do it.
Yeah, when we accompany a company to reduce their environmental footprint, the first thing we are teaching is about extend all life of any devices. And we can talk about, okay, we can buy some refurbished computer, for example, but actually the first thing to do is just to make sure what you already have can stay there and can be used for a long time, for many years. And for example, I have a computer, it's a MacBook Pro, it's 10 years old, and it works well. Just because I did something quite simple when I bought it 10 years ago, I choose some good specs to make sure it can eat the programmed obsolescence, and it's still super powerful. It's still running very well. And the second thing to do is just to make sure you take care of any devices. If your device is broken or it's ugly or whatever in a company, just employees just don't want to use it anymore. So you have to make sure in a company, employees just take care about everything as a good computer to keep it for 3 years. Then they can give it to someone else, then give it to someone else. And at the end, it's not just a 3 years old computer, it's a 7 or 8 years old computer, because at the end, it's with the training, for example. But it's very important because, as I said, 70% of the pollution it's from producing hardware. And that's the same when we are talking about a data center, for example. Because we are all the time speaking about, in data center, it's a lot of energy, and that's true, but it's a lot of server. And a server, it's something like 5 tons of raw materials to be produced. It's almost 300,000 liters of water to be produced. So we have to pay attention to that. If we can produce some bytes using some refurbished server, using some other ways, and just to make sure to avoid to buy new stuff and to produce new stuff, I think we are going a better way.
Okay. So you were slightly derailed in your presentation earlier on, Romain, when your connection dropped. You were should we just get back to that? And while I get back to the notes on that part, we have our first question in about you mentioned GPAC and your deal with Netflix. I think you didn't really clarify what that was about. If you could just tell people in the audience, because not everybody follows your news every day. And then Tommy asks, are you pushing that as the greenest way of packaging? If you'd like to respond to that. So start by, if you could just reposition that deal that we talked that you mentioned earlier, because you didn't actually give the context.
Yes. So the answer is yes. The reason for using GPAC is that it's open source, so you can tweak it the way you want. But eventually, for a company operating at the scale of Netflix with more than 200 million subscribers, is actually to be as efficient as possible. Because at this scale, if you're not efficient, you can saturate the network. And so in terms of sustainability, there is a direct impact. If Netflix saturates the network, then we will need more infrastructures. So yeah, they use GPAC to distribute, to package and distribute their content in the most efficient way.
Okay, well, I hope that answers. And the second part of Tommy's question is, beyond Netflix, is GPAC getting traction outside of the Netflix deal?
Yes, absolutely. There's the thing about open source. Most people see open source like something that is pretty centralized, but this is totally decentralized. That this is a bunch of individuals contributing to something, and there is a bunch of users using it the way they want. So there is a complete lack of visibility on how the open source software that you're contributing in is actually used. And that's one of the reasons why I made a company around it, just because I wanted all these passionate people that I talked about earlier, that are really focused on the software with passion, that they could make it a living, definitely. And what is great is that companies come to us and they ask for licenses, services, trainings on what we do to be able to use the software. And so yes, we have a lot of customers in the industry. I would even say that there is a lot more company that we could imagine that actually use GPAC.
Okay, well, I hope that answers Tommy's question. I'm sure he'll get back if not. So as I was saying just before, we kind of had to cut short your presentation. We're getting towards, we've got another 18 minutes left, and we were missing one leg of your presentation. Do you want to grab that, and maybe if I re-edit this afterwards, I'll resync the different parts of the presentation.
Yeah, actually, I was talking about the fact that you cannot use open source for everything and you cannot share for everything. And I was talking about the need for capital and the fact that corporations had capital when open source software didn't have. And so, for example, if you need devices, for example, just to test, if you're in the media industry, you need devices. If you want to work about mobile streaming, if you want to work about HDR, or you need the access to the devices, to the hardware. So you need the capital also. So open source is not, a solution to everything. Yeah, there is also I think something that we didn't talk about. Probably there is this about efficiency. When open source is really striving for many reasons, and one of them is efficiency, there is this rebound effect that happens because we're more efficient. People have more use of it. When you make video streaming real time, for example, on personal computers, a lot of people are trying to begin to stream by themselves. And so you actually have something that is totally paradoxical, where people actually use more resources because you're more efficient. So that's the rebound effect. I think people know it mostly from cars. I don't know, Simon, if you have good examples of the rebound effect. maybe, to
I
explain to
think
people?
the 5G is a good example because it's 5G antennas has a better efficiency, but we are using more data and more antennas. So at the end, it's a worse impact. So as you said, we have to pay attention. Sometimes we are creating some like more efficiency on the side, but it creates more use on another one. So it's going actually the other way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that when you talk
So-
about 5G, that's the whole thing is the philosophy. And when we were prepping this session, you said about a motorway. If you build a new motorway, that's going to invite more people to own faster cars, because they didn't need the faster cars when they didn't have motorways. Now might as well get a faster car because I can drive faster. Yeah, that's where we've got to be careful. But you want to, so finish off on the where open source is not necessarily the solution.
Yeah, and there is another thing. Imagine that an open source, takes off. That's a monopoly. That's the best. I don't know. Linux takes off on the server side, takes all the market, or these kind of things. When open source kills competition, so I said at the beginning of passionate people, and then you want to find, at least that's what I try to do. You try to make it a living and try to create, communities of people that can live of their passion. I think that's important because that's also something that comes with newer generations where, the younger one, they try to make sense of the work, of what they do, of their lives. It's not work for work or work to help for whatever. It's work for themselves and, trying to find sense to this. And after 10 years trying to make professional open source software, I can say the economics of open source, and I think I could extend it to sustainable communities in general, is actually a complex subject. So it gives sense to people. There is a lot of passion, but we still need to leverage the things that actually work in the corporate space, like all the capitalistic stuff, all the marketing. We should
Just a minute,
orient
though.
it. Yes.
Romain, you said sustainable communities. What I really like to explore is what about communities of people working on sustainable topics. So what I'm saying is these lessons that you've been learning over the last 10 years and longer, that have brought you to be able to function as a company, as a person, having meaning in your life and meaning in your work, and getting up in the morning, enjoying what you do and being able to live off it. You're doing that open source. Could we model some of that to, our first session this year with Hemini was a young woman who does nothing but sustainability now for EBU. I'm trying to understand the journey people go. And one of the issues, I think, is how do we sustain this effort? Sometimes it's going to be great. There'll be some organization, in that case, one like the EBU, that can pay the full-time salary of one person to do nothing but sustainability, and then corporations will do it because of ESG reporting. So there is some money coming in, but there is don't we need a kind of substrate of people who are independent, who can kind of somehow live within, off the system or whatever, to make it all make sense? Do we need a sustainability community, do you think, to move forward the way you've developed over the last few decades an open source community?
You are aware, whether it's artists or people like free thinking and not thinking about money. So not everybody can be in this situation. I'm really lucky, right? I was born in France, in a peaceful country, or at least at peace, in a peace period, and I never needed something. When I wanted to be free, I said, okay, I don't need to be an employee anymore. But when I want to come back of, for example, the employee who would be hired to do sustainability and would feel powerless, I think this is also about structuring organizations to have some real impact, give the power to people to have some impact. It's all related, right? you need to be efficient when you hire someone. So you may do some greenwashing, but I think that in most of the organizations, people understand that there are real challenges, and when they hire people, maybe they don't have the right expectations and they don't delegate the right amount of power and control to these people to be really efficient in what they do. But I think there is a lot of goodwill, and it just failed because of organizations. We were talking just a couple of minutes ago with Simon about the fact that we were not extending the life of devices or recycling the devices or inventing inventions that were not strictly necessary. I think we need to think about this, and it's great that there are people raising their voices and saying that this is not the right thing to do, and helping people to think about this. When you have enough individuals, things start, because we vote, right? Most of us are in democracy, and we vote for people pushing these ideas. So you need to educate people, you need to create communities. But actually, we live in a world where, I mentioned for open source is not communist at all. It's not a bunch of people really organized and try to do things. It's actually individuals, since the Web 2, all over the world, trying to solve, having the same pain points, being passionate about solving a problem. And my feeling is that this is what's happening with sustainability in general. And you need to provide people with guidance about how they can contribute. These people are not interested into money. They are interested into something that makes sense for them. And the younger generation are really sensitive to this.
So if we do, as the sustainability community, have something to learn from the open source community, could we think, what were the main sort of enabling tools, the big watershed moments of my understanding from open sources? There was GitHub or its ancestors, and that kind of, so there had to be a kind of resource somewhere central where we could share, that was had the authority of, if it's there and it's the version 1 in GitHub, that is the version 1 of the real software. That was that a necessary component? And I know there's a whole load of legalese. There was some big infighting between the Richard Stallmans and the different people who started the movement on whether we call it free software, whether the licensing issues, they took like years to sort out. And I think the movement only got some traction once they were fully sorted out. So my initial gut reaction is that whole legalistic stuff, I don't think it's relevant to us in the sustainability thing. I mean, guys in the audience, chime in if you disagree. But I'd have thought the idea of GitHub, I don't know what the parallel would be for us in the sustainability community, but do we need something like that? Some kind of master template, not template, so a repository of good practices? Is it the 17 UN Sustainable Development Initiatives? I don't know what it is. Do we need a kind of central focus, the way do you agree with me first, Romain, that you guys had this central place that kind of made it all make sense?
We made it way before GitHub. Linux is way before GitHub. GPAC is way before GitHub. What I think is that there is a common point to all these people. When you're passionate, you're a hacker. You don't care about the laws. GPAC infringes probably tons of patents, or we used to infringe, because now we're really careful, right? We made a company around it. So now we make sure that, when we push, because we create technology also at ISO in MPEG. And so we make sure that the things are royalty free, and that's okay. But for example, when we leverage FFmpeg to decode H.264, you take GPAC, you never pay for this. When you encode, you never pay for this. You never pay, you don't care, right? You're hackers. That's kind of individual, rights of people to do things and to hack things. And I like this hacker stuff, the hacker spaces, the hackathons, with people gathering. It's like, really citizens. Like you empower yourself to solve problems, not necessarily your problems. At the beginning, it's your pain point, and that's how you become, passionate about it. But at least you find some energy that just moves you forward. It's not time to make laws to just slow down the innovation on sustainability. It's time to welcome, all the possibilities because we have a huge challenge in front of us.
Okay, so basically, that the GitHub idea was out of was not correct, but the idea, if I'm trying to find parallel for inspiration for our movement, which is much younger than your movement, what would you say? We spent a lot of time in the beginning of the year, and in general, we talk about the journey into sustainability, because as you start realizing things, you like the Jevons paradox, the rebound effect, these things hit you in the face, and oh my God, if I solve the problem the wrong way, I'm going to make it worse, kind of thing. So you have to get on this journey and learn. What would be for the typical open source enthusiast, somebody who lives off it? Is there a kind of, what's the motivation and goal? So you presumably, literally you live off your work from open source. You manage to draw an income to live, so that's one motivation. But what other motivation? Is it just a recognition among the community?
I'm a geek. I'm sorry, that's my only motivation, is to solve technical problems and coding on my computer and doing my. It's like someone passionate about wood. The woods all the time. They would try to make sculptures and make tables, and they would like to work it. It's kind of a morning, and I say, okay, now I have the solution to my problem. It's like a game for me. That's what passion is about, right? I don't know if I could have stayed so long in this industry, like it's been 17 years now. That could be in this industry and cover all these things if I were not passionate about. It's difficult to stay years in the same field and practicing every day and spending your time all day trying to solve these problems. You need to be passionate. And I'm pretty sure it's a non-sexy problem. I'm pretty sure what Simon, I'm really admirative of what Simon is doing. I'm pretty sure there are tons of younger people who are really willing to help. We need to make it sexy and to give them the opportunity to be useful. For software, it's really easy. You learn programming, which is kind of the difficult part. Everybody has a computer. Everybody has an internet connection. You can make your own problem. When it comes to sustainability, imagine you want to reuse a hardware. You want to improve the reusability of the hardware. What do you do from here? If you believe in it, you want to do it. What do you do from here? You need to find people. I agree with you. Maybe sustainability or a social thing, but what do you do from there?
I don't know, maybe you can ask Simon about his motivation, because Simon, this project you said is 8 years old. It's been a company for 4 years. It wasn't probably the fastest way to get rich quick. You could have optimized things if that was your thing. So what's making you get up in the morning and keep working on your GreenWeb project? And is there a community spirit aspect to it? Are you on your own on this thing? Tell us a bit about how what motivates you when you have a big problem to solve for the GreenWeb project.
I would say the difference between Romain and me, it's I'm a marketer. I'm not tech. so my point of view is user oriented. Like it makes me think about when you are talking about open source, open source are really like tech driven. And on my side, when we produce things, we are UX, UI driven. Like for me, it's a bit different. And I think we have to find the right balance for any open source project to make sure we can have the interface users are looking for. I think it's something we have to work all together on open source. For me, every morning, just wake up and think about what's happening, what's going to happen on Earth. I'm thinking about my two daughters, and I just say, okay, I have to move myself and to reduce, like, my job is really to reduce the environmental footprint of my clients. When I say, okay, my clients come over me and say, okay, my environmental impact is 50. Okay, so we have to work together, and you will leave our relationship with the environmental footprint like 10. So we divided it by 5. And that's my job, and that's the challenge I really like. So I used to speak about environmental performance because I'm from sports. Like, I was professional sportsman some years ago, and I keep in mind that we have to, and human-like challenge, like Romain say when he woke up every morning, is in a challenge to solve any problem. I'm in a challenge to just to say, okay, today what we did, we took something high like this in environmental performance, and we've been in here. So I won my day if I can calculate it and say, okay, we helped this client and we did that. So I think it's my main motivation. And the other thing is really like Roman said, like working in a community, sharing some ideas, some stuff, and to make sure together, together we are stronger, because alone we are maybe faster, but we are stronger together. I think it's a main point as well.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry I let this slightly overrun, so we're a few minutes over. We're going to close the session now, and when you close your window, depending on your UI, you'll either get the other session will there, or you might have to go to another tab. But there's another session starting now for slightly less than an hour now, an open mic session, so we can just carry on the discussion, and hopefully I won't need to do so much talking. Everybody else, please join in. So close this one down. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much, Romain. I'll see you in literally a few seconds on the other side.
Okay, thanks.
Bye, guys.
See you now.